joining us today at Distributed 2019. I'm excited to start our panel, and I'd like you to meet Hiten Shah, a leader who has a big experience in hiring and building remote teams. So Hiten, you can start the session now.
Thank you, Anna. And thanks to everyone on the Miro team for putting this together. And thanks to the panelists as well, who you'll meet in a quick second. And thanks to everyone who's here as well. So those are my thank yous, and they're done for now until a little bit later. So, you know, we're here to talk about remote work, particularly around hiring distributed product teams. And we have some great people to join us. So I'm going to introduce myself last because Anna just kind of introduced me. And I'm going to have each person introduce themselves. So whoever wants to go, please go. Otherwise, I'll start picking on one of the three of you. And what we want to hear is, I want you to introduce yourself with basically what you do, where you do it today, and then what's your #1 remote work habit, good or bad? And I promise mine will be great.
I can go ahead and start.
Go ahead.
My name is Chloe Oddleifson, and I am the Director of People Operations at Dribbble. If you're not familiar, Dribbble is a platform for designers to showcase their work, and we're also a hiring platform. We have the biggest job board for designers in the world. So that's kind of cool. I have a fully distributed team, so we have no central headquarters anywhere. I live in Victoria, BC, which is on Vancouver Island, just off the coast of Vancouver, if you're not familiar. And my role is really to help support our team in doing their best work wherever they work best. So my #1 remote work hack or tip, my rule is to never eat lunch alone. And so every day I schedule one sort of social out of the house activity, and it doesn't have to be over lunch. You know, sometimes it's coffee with grandma, sometimes it's walking around the block listening to a podcast, but that is my remote tip for you. I can pass it to Jessica or Andreas.
I can go, sure. Hi, Jessica Tiwari. I am a VP on the product team at Upwork. Upwork's a freelance marketplace. More important to this conversation, we are about 1,400 people, and 1,000 of them are remote, and 400 are across 3 different offices. So we're pretty big, and we've always been about that ratio of people that are not located in an office to people that are in an office. Prior to Upwork, I actually worked with a fully distributed team as a remote employee for 10 years as a product person. So been like living that and also helping other people through that transition for a long time. Remote hack, I think one of the things that I found super helpful at Upwork, where we have a lot of very remote people and a lot of different levels of speaking speed, shall we say. I'm probably on the fast end of speaking speed, but we also have a lot of people that have a hard time following when someone is speaking as quickly as me. So we like to project our notes and to be real-time editing the notes in the meeting while it's happening, so that people that can visually process, read the notes and the words and make sure that they're actually agreeing in the course of the meeting has really helped us kind of keep things on track and avoid confusion.
Nice one. I go next. Andreas. I'm European born. I'm currently based in San Francisco. I used to be the founding team and CTO of a company called Product Hunt, and we got acquired by AngelList like 2.5 years ago, and I'm currently leading all product efforts related to remote work for AngelList. For those who don't know, AngelList is the largest job board for remote work when it comes to startups. We have like 16,000 or so roles open right now. My main hack or tip, I mean, I will go with a product because Product Hunt, right? I have a little app in my, I don't know how you can call it, like menu bar in Mac, right? It's called Menu Bar Clock, where you can just have multiple time zones. And I removed my normal clock actually. And I have my time zone, New York time zone, like Central European time zone and Indian time zone. And I honestly think this is a lifesaver every day.
Thank you all for introducing yourselves and sharing your hack or habit. Nobody shared a bad one, so I'm not going to share a bad one either. So I'm Hiten Shah. I've built a bunch of different SaaS businesses. I've been doing remote work, particularly product and sort of management type of work for the last 16 years. And I'm just the moderator today, so I'll be asking lots of questions for these folks and getting their answers. My habit is that I actually sit on a beanbag. So I'm sitting on a beanbag right now. It's not a cheap beanbag. It's as much as like a fancy chair. Well, it's not like $1,000 or anything. It's like a couple $100, and it's from Muji. And I used to sit on an Aeron chair, and this is just as comfortable. And what's really cool is I can go move it around in different places in my house. So yeah, so that's why the windows are back here, and they're kind of low because I'm sitting on a beanbag and I'm super comfortable. So that's my habit. All right, we're going to dive right in so that we can get as much knowledge as possible today. So the first question is, how do you successfully hire remote team members? And anyone can answer it, but I love picking on people, so I'm happy if we have too much silence here. So how do you successfully hire remote team members? I know this is an easy question, so anyone that wants to answer it.
I don't mind starting if, because awkward pauses. Oh,
yeah, please do. Go ahead. Yeah,
right.
Awkward pauses, right? Go ahead. Go ahead.
I mean, I will just give one tip because this is something that could go for like the entire session if we let it. One of the things that we try to do at Upwork when we're hiring someone who we know will be remote and is starting off remote, we try to make sure that we're hiring someone that has a skill that we can immediately apply to problems that we have right now. And the purpose of that is to try to get that person as many opportunities to give product and give ideas and provide feedback to us. That is something that we really need as fast as possible. So it's kind of like a way to quickly evaluate that person through the actual quality and quantity of the work output that they're able to deliver. It's very difficult to do that if you are hiring someone based on like future potential or future, like you can go for a long time with a remote hire without actually knowing whether they're able to deliver what you need. So that's one of the techniques that we practice along with many others. Who's up?
I can go next. It's kind of, I feel like it's almost like school where Hiten actually knows all the answers. Like for those who don't know, like Hiten shouldn't be moderating the panel. Like we should basically interview Hiten all together. He's like,
no, please no.
Old school, like
I'll take it.
Top dogs here. But anyway, like regarding hiring, I mean, I think a completely underappreciated value is content marketing. Like building a good brand in the remote space is worth like any line of text in gold. Like the amount of quality inbound you get because of that is usually, in my personal opinion, worth it. When it comes to the actual hiring, maybe it's because I'm a non-native speaker. For me, everybody who's a native speaker English sounds like automatically smarter. And I noticed this bias, especially in San Francisco, where I have a lot of like people who sound really smart when you actually work with them, and they're a little bit like more talk than action. So my personal recommendation here is prioritize, for example, in engineering, pair programming, or when it's like non-engineering, actual work for evaluating people versus focusing primarily on CVs or interviews. I'm also very biased when it comes to CVs. Like if I don't know the university, I don't instantly have this credential effect that I would have, for example, if I see Stanford. So my personal experience is actual work, especially if you do it together during the hiring process, is usually the most effective way to evaluate people.
I think that's super insightful. I think balancing sort of evaluating people on the culture side and evaluating people on their technical skill side is something we've really worked towards and sort of strive to make sure we're balancing equally. When we look to hire remotely, I think what sort of helped us be successful there is to really clarify what a successful remote candidate or remote employee looks like for us on our team. And so that really looks like someone that's a strong communicator, because so much of our communication is over written communication, like in Slack or in emails or Google Docs, for example. Another thing is just someone that's conscientious, someone that sort of is going to be aware of the nuances that remote work entails and will be able to navigate those successfully. People that are trustworthy, people that are kind. I think a lot of times when people think culture fit, people think in terms of, oh, would I want to go grab a beer with this person after work? And for us, it's very important to be clear that that's not what culture fit means. Culture fit means that they are kind, they are down to earth, They're humble, they're willing to leave their ego at the door. So I think being really clear in terms of what culture fit means for you, and then also being clear on how you will evaluate their actual work product, and making sure that you integrate sort of technical skills assessment into your interview process. Those have both been sort of two things that have worked really well for us.
Awesome. All three of you did great on the first kind of simple question, not so simple.
I told you it's a test.
It's always a test. It's always a test. Okay. The next one I find really interesting because we're all sort of used to, or many of us are used to, one way of working, which is working in an office. At some point, I think we all did it. I did it for a very short period of my time in my life, but and that was in high school actually as an intern. So the question I have is, how is hiring for a distributed team different than a co-located team when you're all in the office? And I think that this is valuable for anyone who is trying to go remote or trying to have more remote folks and hire more remote folks, even if they already are on a co-located team. So I wanted to sort of get all of your thoughts on this since you folks have done a bunch of hiring.
I can go first if it's okay. I think it's not, in this case, it's not so much the actual hiring, but like, let's say like onboarding or afterwards the phase. For some reason, there is this magic moment when people actually meet for the first time in a team, and you kind of understand like little things that you noticed before, and like they may click and you understand like the person better. In my experience, it's just worth getting to people like new hires and like just have opportunities to actually meet the rest of their, at least their specific team. I think that's worth a lot of money. I remember first time at Product Hunt, for example, when we actually met in person, I didn't even know if I should shake hands or high five or hug people, because we spent all day in Slack, but still like all of a sudden very different, right? So I think this is absolutely worth doing in, as soon as possible if you have the process and the capacities for that, or like are still at a scale where it's possible.
Thanks.
I don't feel very well qualified to answer this question because I'm actually part of the generation that has never worked in the office. So I have only ever exclusively hired remotely. But what I think is what sort of sets hiring remotely apart from hiring in the office is really what's at stake. So the way that our sort of philosophy around it is that trust has to exist from day one. We don't have the ability to sort of slowly build trust over time. When you're remote, you don't have the ability to lean over into someone's cubicle and see if they're working or if they're having a bad day or if they're being successful right off the bat. And so I think what's at stake is really ensuring that you have an effective hiring process in place. That means you can set people up for success. You can get the right butts into the right seats right off the bat, because you don't really have the luxury that you have when you're sort of in the office, where you're able to, you know, take people around and meet the team, or you're able to go for a first day lunch. You kind of have to get creative and find substitutes for those. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's sort of what my experience has been there anyways.
So we've had we actually recently went through a sort of interesting thought exercise on this. We had a Mountain View office and we had to move out of it, had to decide whether we were going to open a Santa Clara office or not. And it raised this question of, you know, hiring distributed versus hiring in an office, and the types of people that you have within your company and where they are the most productive and where they thrive. And what we discovered was, even with Upwork, like a very remote friendly, sort of remote driven like company, we've acquired along the way over our life a lot of people that just don't know how or are not happy in a remote environment. So there is a difference between people that prefer distributed, prefer remote, or are the most productive in that environment, and people that just can't make that work. And our goal now is to provide, much like when you have an open office plan, you have to have different sorts of work environments for different types of people depending on how they like to focus and what sort of work they're doing. We're trying to create enough different sorts of work environments that everyone that we have in the company and all the different ways that they work will be supported. So we opened the Santa Clara office because we had a bunch of people that are most productive in an office. And those people, you couldn't just like take the office away and expect them to be as productive and as happy as they had been. So when if you take that and translate it to how do you hire remote and how is that different than hiring distributed, I think that when we hire remote, we try to make sure that the people that we are bringing on have an established remote work routine, that they know what this means, that they are accountable, that they are collaborative, you know, that you can trust them and vice versa, and really just that they know what they're getting into if they haven't done it before. We've been fortunate, like Chloe mentioned, there's more and more people where it's just, you can assume that people know what they're doing because it's kind of the norm now. That wasn't always the case, and for a while there we had to be a little bit more careful about making sure that people had high-speed internet always available, that they had a good video, like all of the things that you can now kind of take for granted.
But yeah, the world has definitely evolved. The tooling has definitely gotten better, and so is the plumbing, so to speak. Okay, so on to the next topic or category, which is onboarding, which I really was eager to talk about, especially because I think all three of you have some very fascinating and insightful thinking around that. Plus, onboarding is a challenge regardless of what type of work you do, distributed company or not. So question number one, what are your goals when onboarding new remote team members?
I can take this one. The goal of our onboarding process is really to set people up for success right away. And so what that means for us is it means that they're going to be recognized right away, and it means that they're going to be integrated into our culture right away, and it means that they're going to be able to hit the ground running and participate in actual work. So they're not just spending days and days doing, reading training manuals and things like that. They're actually able to jump in off the deep end. That said, we don't want to leave them to sink or swim. When I joined Dribbble, our onboarding process was really like pushing people off the edge of the pool and yelling like, swim, sucker. And so we've definitely evolved that over the past couple of years. And so we have a couple different sort of rituals and routines in place. We've implemented an onboarding buddy system. So we found that there are nuances to remote work culture, and we were sort of leaving people to figure it out by themselves. Like we do selfie Fridays, and people were kind of like, why are people sharing photos in Slack on Fridays? Like, what is this about? There were just funny routines that we really wanted to make sure people didn't feel like outsiders about. So having an onboarding buddy has been really effective. Every new hire meets our entire leadership team within their first week. So they have one-on-one coffees to get introduced to them. We set up a 30, 60, 90-day plan so they know exactly what the expectations are and they're clear right off the bat. They get onboarded to all their tools in advance so they're not spending their first day setting things up. Those are just a couple examples, but that's sort of the goal of our onboarding process.
Cool.
To add to this, like a product, and we pretty much had the same approach. We called it optimizing for single player mode. So the whole idea is, obviously you want people to work together as a team, but in reality, if like imagine you're playing Mario and like you press jump and Mario doesn't jump, but instead you have to wait for somebody else to do something before Mario jumps. That's really exhausting to play Mario, right? So the whole idea was kind of like, how do we get to the point that people know what to do, how to do it, have a lot of processes, because processes are basically just systemized expectations. Like all of this in place that they can, in a way, level up on their own pace, like in their own speed. Like some people really like reading carefully something very shortly and then like trying out stuff. How can you try out stuff without constantly looking at an idiot in front of everybody when you just joined? So in engineering, that can mean automatic tools that just tell you if you do something wrong, for example, or very clear guidelines how you should act, or like, and all this kind of stuff. And I think this is like true for any kind of team. Most advice in remote work is actually just good management advice. And this again is just true for any good team, but it's especially true for remote work where just like having somebody next to each other and just constantly asking little questions is like too expensive. So yeah, we call it internally like optimizing for single player mode.
So I think, I mean, honestly, yes, all of those. Those are all fantastic and very much what we're trying to do. The only thing I would add is we also try to use that onboarding process for skills matching. We want to find the role that is the best fit for the person that we brought on and where they can have the most impact and be the happiest. And onboarding is also sort of a skills assessment time where you're not being evaluated, you're not held accountable for anything yet. We can use this time to figure out what are you best at, what are you most interested in, and slot you into the right position and the right team.
Yep, all those are great. I love the idea that, you know, you have this, it's the same thing as onboarding, regardless of if you're remote or not, in great part. And some of the analogies, it's really insightful. So now to get even a little bit deeper, I'd love to hear what each of your onboarding processes is for the new remote team members at your companies. Because I heard some really interesting things when we talked about this before the panel.
So my sort of personal take is that onboarding really starts with the first interview. So I was peeking in the Q&A a little bit. Sorry if I'm getting ahead of us here, but I think really giving the goal of our interview process is really to give it, we see it as a two-way street. So it's really engineered to give both us and a candidate a 50-50 chance at being able to get through the entire interview process and at the end really make an informed decision about whether or not it's the right fit for both of us. As much as we need it to be a fit for us, we also need it to be a fit for our candidate in order for it to be a mutual fit, right? So we sort of spend a lot of time talking through what remote work looks like at Dribbble. For example, the fact that we don't set office hours and what that means, and how would you go about setting your day if you were remote and you weren't held accountable to clocking in at 9 and clocking out at 5? What, you know, how would you sort of handle that, and what challenges do you think would come up along the way? That's sort of how we assess for things like trustworthiness, conscientiousness, the ability to thrive in a remote atmosphere. And so I think really giving people as big a snapshot as you possibly can into what life looks like at your company, even in your first interview, is sort of crucial to onboarding, so that when you get to actually, you know, their first day, or, you know, exchanging emails after the offer letter is being signed and letting them know what's coming up, they already have a really solid picture of what the expectations are moving forward. So, you know, like I said, we have an onboarding buddy program. They meet with their manager, expectations are laid out so that they're able to jump in and sort of use their skills and do what we hired them for right on day one. Do you want me to go into other details, or is that okay?
If you have any like tidbit to share or some best practice, sure, of course.
I think the other thing, I heard Andreas mention sort of the importance of getting to meet with your team face to face. We do bring our remote team together at least once or twice a year, but what we do in the meantime is we have an all hands team call every week. So a new hire is able to meet with the entire company within a day or two of them starting. Those happen Tuesday mornings. Usually new hires start on Monday, so they're able to meet with everyone and really start to put faces to the names, have an opportunity to sort of start to build that cohesion and connection and start to foster that engagement that is really sort of so important to setting the tone for someone's employee experience with you. So I'm a huge advocate for sort of remote all hands town halls.
It's really neat.
So I would echo that. We also have remote friendly all hands. They're monthly, and we try to time new hires as much as possible, especially like very strategic new hires, around the same time as the annual meetups that each of the team has. You know, obviously that's not usually possible, but whenever it is possible, it's great to actually have those things scheduled so that they can physically meet everyone on the team at the same time. Absent that, you know, we'll do next best thing, like you'll meet with each person individually on your team and remotely, and sort of have catch-ups with them just to sort of figure out the lay of the land. But yeah, the all hands ongoing, incredibly valuable.
The answer is a little bit harder in my case, because AngelList is kind of like this network of multiple companies that are all very different and have different culture and like different states of like how many people are remote. The easiest answer is like around product count, because it's a fairly decent sized remote team. And I will cheat here because like this onboarding process was actually set up after I left. Like it's set up by Rado, who's like now leading the engineering team, but I'm such a big fan of how he does this. Basically, the premise is if you join, like when you join, better to say, after week 1 in the next team call, you demo what you built. And that's super scary. Like if you're like in most engineering teams, like you're happy if you get anything to work in your first week, let alone demo something to the rest of the team. And that's like just terrifying in my opinion, but he's just such a big, nice teddy bear that he makes it work for everybody and everybody feels like it's good. And the other thing he does is, or they do is in month one, you're supposed to either remove something or add something reusable to the system, which is also like if you're an engineer and work on complex code base, it's kind of scary. The main premise here though is if you fail to do that, actually the team failed and not you, because like the whole process is meant in a way that you are supposed to be enabled to actually get there and do that. And if something goes wrong, somebody else failed. Like either the processes are not right, the whole tooling isn't right, or somebody just hired the wrong person in the extreme variant. But like actually the team failed. So it's kind of like in the intent of the team to make you succeed, at least with the first demo a lot. So yeah, that's like the most radical onboarding process I know, and I'm a big fan of it.
I really love that. We do a really similar thing with our engineers where we have them pull code on day 1 or 2 and sort of get them in there right away, which I think is super important. Something that you said really resonated with me when you were kind of talking about the idea that your team failed. That's another one of our sort of criteria for what makes an ideal remote worker, remote employee, is that they're a willing teammate. It's part of our core values that we sort of bring good vibes. So we are team players. We're ready to go the extra mile to help one another. All of us are sort of ready to jump in wherever we're needed, even if it's sort of not strictly within our job description. And I really do feel like sort of hiring people with those characteristics is so successful to building a strong remote team and having that sort of strong team mentality.
Awesome. Yeah, I think these are all great things. Now we're going to move on to kind of I would say more challenging topic, and I'm glad I saved it for kind of second to last, even though it's really the last big one, which is offboarding. So this was another one that was very fascinating. I loved a lot of the thinking around it when we talked earlier. So yep, this is it. Basically, tell us how you think about offboarding people. And yeah, again, it's one of those emotional times. So on a remote team, I think it's no different. So I'd love to hear how all of you think about that.
Yeah, we'll go first. I don't think firing people is something emotional. And maybe it's the Germanic in me talking, or maybe like, I don't know, borderline Asperger, I have no idea. But to me, it's amazing talent joins if you do everything right, like amazing talent joins your company, and there's a certain career where they join you, and at some point everybody will leave the company, or the company will, like either they die, the company dies, or they leave the company. Like these are the 3 options, right? And I hope the company doesn't die, and I hope they don't die. So like realistically, people at some point will switch, and it's a completely normal process in anybody's career. And this kind of thinking that you are betraying somebody by leaving is completely wrong, in my opinion. In my opinion, if you enable people to grow within your company, they are excited about working there. And at some point, maybe you can no longer provide that growth opportunity. And at that point, it might be actually good if you help them transition out of the company, right? I referred a lot of some of my best engineers I ever worked with, I got them the next jobs. And that's like even some of the worst engineers I worked with, I got them other good jobs. The other thing is, very often when you fire somebody, it's kind of like this person isn't good. You know, I had people in my team that didn't work in our team at all and switched to, I won't like say brands now because then they know I'm talking about them, but like top level companies, like tier 1 companies, and did like amazing positions and amazing jobs there. So very often it's people plus context is output. So very often you just don't provide the right context. And if you cannot, like if you, in this kind of discussion, usually focus around the context and like how the context can change and how the context cannot change, we have usually a very productive discussion about like what can the company actually accommodate and what can it not accommodate. And it maybe at some point, maybe it's not a good fit. And if it's not a good fit, like what would be a good transition out? And to me, I mean, obviously nobody wants to lose their income and nobody should lose their income. But on the other hand, there is like ways to smoothen this out and like help people and like transition people and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, maybe I come across like a complete sociopath right now, but like to me, this isn't like that much of an emotional thing as it's usually presented to be.
No, contrarian viewpoints are okay. That doesn't mean you're a sociopath. It might mean you're crazy, but not a sociopath.
I'm gonna echo your sociopathic comments. So
You're
make you
crazy as
feel
well.
better. Right. So yeah, similarly, I think that the most important thing that I always try to remember is that there is a role at a company that is going to make everyone thrive. Like, it may not be within your company, and this gets to some of the stuff that I think Chloe was mentioning before around, like, even if you have the perfect skill set and you have the perfect routine, you may not be a cultural fit for a certain company. And there are, like it or not, like that is a key aspect to people's happiness within their roles. So as much as we can, we try to find spots within the company that maximize people's that get people to their full potential, right? That have them as happy as possible, that have them utilizing their skills where they really want to be there. If we can't find that, it's much more of a mutual agreement. It's not like, oh, we think you're terrible. It's, what are you good at? What do you want to do? Can we find it? If so, everyone's happy. If we can't find it, then it's a mutually agreed, this is not the best place for you. Let's find something better. And it makes it less like sort of harmful and hurtful and aggressive sounding when it is this like mutual approach and you're sort of helping them along their way to the next thing. There is something out there for everyone, and it just might not be, here.
Yeah, I think it's been like perfectly said before me. I would just add that, I think it's a very natural, my approach is to always aim to have open and honest conversations with people about, if it's not a fit here, let's look at the opportunities that exist elsewhere and how we can better support you in your next transition to your next role, or whatever that may be, if we're not able to, engage and fulfill you within our company at the moment. I think a quote that sums up my feelings around offboarding really well is that there is grief in change, but we should never let that grief stop us from believing or from doing the right thing. I cannot take credit from that quote. I'm pretty sure I saw it on Instagram. So, but I mean, super applicable, right? Like, change is always hard, especially on a remote team when sometimes offboarding decisions look really sudden and people aren't able to see sort of the behind the scenes of what went into them, but they are always, always, always made extremely thoughtfully. Whenever we run into situations where we're looking at involuntary offboarding or terminations, we have sort of an entire process that we follow to make sure that we never rush into decisions, that they're never made without examining all our options, that we look at whether we're able to reskill or move someone into a different role. So yeah, I think, but Jessica and Andreas really, really kind of summed it up perfectly.
You folks are so nice to each other. I like it, but I'm supposed to rile you up. I'm not doing a good job, but no, it's good. Go ahead, Andreas.
We can just start disagreeing with everybody. We can go full Fox News panel to make
There we go. No, let's not do that. Okay, this last one is definitely not going to be a disagreement. I think it's going to be a different take. So hopefully. And if not, that's totally cool. That means that all of you are kind of in line and have the best practices in mind that everyone needs to hear. So this is the final question that's not from the audience. And what it is if someone comes to you and asks you for the one thing that they need to keep in mind when hiring successfully on a remote team, what would you say to them? The one thing. And Andreas, the one thing, okay?
She's saying you're talking too much, I get it. I would say everything is ultimately your fault. And that's like the management, like that's a principal management advice I give to anybody. And it's especially true in remote teams where you need to level up as a manager a lot.
Want to follow on that. So similar, it is not about the technology that you have. It's about the process that you put in place around that technology that's going to empower these people to be successful. So it is all your fault because if they fail, it's on your process, and it's not about you got the wrong tools. It's about how are you using them.
Yeah, I think mine is kind of along the same lines that I think people are your biggest asset. And so when you're hiring remote, having an extremely thoughtful and sort of well put together hiring process is going to be your best friend. I think the first step to that is really clarifying what your core values are as a company if you don't already have those. Or if you're thinking about going remote and taking a look at your values and saying, does this apply if we're still fully remote and distributed? Because you will use those values throughout the process and they will inform how you're able to hire and who you hire. Yeah, that's it.
I think that's a wrap. So thank you all for joining us and speaking your truth, so to speak, on the panel, the three of you. Thanks again.
Thanks for moderating.
Thank you so much for moderating, and thanks Jessica and Andreas and Miro for sharing all your insight. It was so great to chat with you guys.
Likewise. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you.